It can be hard enough to get in a workout, get enough sleep, or maintain other healthy habits even when we do finish work at a time that gives us a few hours before bed. But what happens when we don't?
Sometimes our schedules allow us the flexibility and freedom to do all of those things, which is great. But other times, when we're busy on multiple projects all moving at once, or when things are really urgent, we simply don't have the luxury to fit everything in.
Hi guys, welcome to our channel. It's Em
and Lloyd, and today we want to talk to you a little bit about the things that we do to maintain our healthy lifestyles when things get really busy at work. First off, we should give some context as to what we're talking about, as there's quite a bit of variation between our working schedules, even amongst ourselves. I'm a corporate transactions lawyer, and Emily's a corporate disputes lawyer. For me, as a transactions lawyer, things can get really busy when I'm on one or two active deals or transactions, as our clients usually want things to be done pretty quickly, and it takes us quite a bit of effort to negotiate and draft documents properly.
As a disputes lawyer, the pacing of my work is quite different. I do a lot of arbitration litigation where cases generally run on for years, but with regular deadlines. So as a result, when I'm working on multiple active cases, things will be steadily busy and then ramp up when a deadline or hearing approaches. It works out so I don't end up having to work until the middle of the night too frequently, but I don't really get quiet periods either.
One time, I was on two really big transactions that were both moving very quickly, and even with just those two deals, I was starting my days usually around 8:45 a.m. and ending at around 3 or 4 a.m., including on weekends. Not every transaction I work on moves at that pace, but when deals start to move that quickly, things can get really bad really quick.
Sometimes for me, I'll have several major deadlines that are back-to-back or that clash. When that happens, my days usually run from about 9 a.m. to about 10 p.m. to midnight for a few weeks, including weekends. However, in the few days leading up to a deadline, things can get unpredictable and I could be working much later, or if I'm unlucky, all night.
At busy times like this, while it sometimes feels like all we want to do is lay in bed and watch YouTube videos or play video games to unwind, we have found that using that time in an ineffective way can have an impact on our sleep, our recovery, and also our ability to bounce back after the busy period is over.
Truthfully, there's only so much one can do to try to maintain a healthy lifestyle when things are moving that quickly and are that busy. However, over time, we've come up with a few strategies that really make a difference, especially in the long run, which we'd like to share with you today. You guys will probably hate us for this one, and trust me, we love our coffee. But the first principle we live by if we're working late nights, especially if it's multiple nights in a row, is watching our caffeine intake while staying hydrated.
Now before we get into this, we do want to caveat that for both of us, having our daily coffee is quite literally the most enjoyable part of our day. But hear us out on this one.
While we love our coffee as much as a lot of other people do, we try to enjoy it in a way which sets us up for success at work. In the short term, caffeine consumption can do a lot to help with work, for instance, by helping you stay more alert and focused and possibly be more efficient.
But over time, we found that especially if we're expecting several busy days in a row, overconsuming caffeine can be incredibly counterproductive. Overconsuming caffeine can have a really big impact on sleep, and if you have a bad sleep and wake up the next day feeling even more tired, you want to drink even more coffee, and that has a ripple effect going forward as well. Now this isn't to say that we don't have any coffee when things are busy at work, but we do two things to try to manage our caffeine consumption to make our coffees work for us rather than against us. The first thing we do is to try to limit our coffees to one per day, even if it's a slightly larger coffee, and the second is to cut off all caffeine consumption by a certain time in the day, which for both of us is usually around 2 or 3 p.m.
Now, the reason we do that is because caffeine does take quite a long time to get out of our systems. We used to think that if we were already really tired, an extra cup or two of coffee couldn't have that much of an effect on us or impact our sleep that much. However, caffeine has quite a long half-life, meaning the amount of time it takes to lose half of its effect on your body, and that's reportedly anywhere between 5 to 8 hours long. So even if it may not feel like it, 5 to 8 hours after you've had a cup of coffee, half of the effects of the caffeine are still in your system.
While this may change based on a person's genetics, and a lot of people like to say that having coffees later in the day has no impact on their sleep, we found that overconsuming caffeine or having coffees later in the day tends to have an impact on sleep and recovery. We've tested this by tracking our sleep with our various wearables, including our Whoop band and Oura rings, and we've found that even if we don't necessarily feel like it, having coffees later in the day or overconsuming caffeine does have a tangible impact on our sleep and recovery.
On top of this, caffeine is a diuretic, meaning that it makes your body flush out water and therefore salt more quickly. To counter this, we always try to make sure to stay hydrated while also supplementing with electrolytes if needed. We find that when we don't do this, the dull discomfort we get from being too dehydrated or depleted of salts really affects our productivity in the office. The second principle we live by is prioritizing our sleep as much as possible. Obviously, this ties into the caffeine point earlier, but there are things aside from watching our caffeine intake which we do to prioritize our sleep.
Now it's important to mention that on days when we're working into the middle of the night and we need to start again the next day at 8 or 9 a.m., there's already a hard limit to the amount of sleep that we're going to be able to get. However, our focus is usually on making sure that we get the maximum amount and the highest quality of sleep in any given circumstance. And honestly, it's worth mentioning that in busy times like this, we can go for a few nights of really minimal sleep and push through with adrenaline. But when that adrenaline runs out and we crash, it's really not a pretty sight.
On the flip side, we find that whenever we have really busy periods, if we don't try and rest and conserve energy as much as possible, we need a lot longer to recover properly after things slow down. It can be super frustrating when all you want to do is spend some more time in the gym or cook yourself some nice meals, but you're too tired to really do any of that in the first week or two after a really busy rush.
Now, in terms of sleep quality, one of the biggest challenges for us and for many others that we know is engaging in revenge bedtime procrastination. Revenge bedtime procrastination is a phenomenon where you stay up later than necessary, even when your time might already be very limited, to do things to make you feel like you have a little bit more control over your day.
For example, if you're busy with work almost the entire time that you're awake and you didn't get the chance to do anything that felt fun or personal, there's often a strong temptation to stay up after you finish your work to do things like watch Netflix or play video games. And then, before you know it, an hour or two has passed and you've lost a good portion of the critical few hours for sleep that you actually had.
Now, there's a fine line here too. Having a bit of time to unwind and do something you enjoy before going to sleep can be really therapeutic and help you get into the headspace for sleep. But what we try to avoid doing is burning too much time and getting far less sleep, leading to decreased productivity the next day.
So what we usually do is to put a limit on the amount of time that we allow ourselves to engage in revenge bedtime procrastination, while also making sure that we engage in activities that don't interfere with the quality of our sleep.
For instance, I often get the urge to play video games before sleep, but the blue light coming off my screen and the amount of focus that's required for me to play the games I love usually means that I'm not in the right headspace for sleep after I'm finished playing. Instead, I've been using my Kindle with blue light blocking glasses to read comic books, manga, or fiction before sleep, and I usually limit myself to around 10 or 15 minutes at most.
For me, I usually feel the urge to watch something on YouTube as I'm winding down for bed, especially if I'm stretching. However, the problem with that, aside from the blue light coming from my phone, is that's really easy to get distracted by YouTube's recommendation section. So my preferred way to wind down is just to put my phone away entirely and not look at any screens while I stretch, and if I have time, I'll also read something, whether it's on my Kindle or a hard copy book. The last part I want to talk about is making sure to get in a bit of movement every day. While we're all generally aware that some physical activity is beneficial, it tends to fall by the wayside when things get really busy at work.
Now for this, we aren't necessarily talking about getting in full workouts when things are really busy at work. For us, when things are particularly dire, we try to do our best to maintain the bare minimum of what's required for our mental and physical well-being, especially because we're already usually stressed, sleep deprived, and sitting at a desk for more than 12 hours in a day.
We find that if we can spare even 15 to 20 minutes for a quick workout or to take a walk and do some stretching, it makes a huge difference in terms of our overall mood, energy, and focus.
Exercise stimulates the production of endorphins, which can really help manage the amount of stress that's usually involved with busy periods like this. If we feel like we don't even have 15 or 20 minutes to spare, we do try to create short breaks for ourselves where we can get a little bit of movement in, even if it's just for 5 minutes. For instance, sometimes if I've sent out a document or finished a big task, I'll put on some music and take a walk around the office if I'm in, or I'll roll out my yoga mat if I'm working from home and do some air squats or push-ups.
I also like to take a quick walk outside my office on top of taking a few minutes to stretch in the mornings and at night. While it wasn't always the case, after working in an office for a few years, I found that if I skipped this for even a couple of days, I really felt a difference, especially in my lower back and my hips. This kind of physical discomfort only really ends up adding to the stress of already having to work long hours.
One natural way to get a little bit of movement in is to stay hydrated, which we talked about before, because if you're properly hydrated, Mother Nature will remind you to stand up and go for a walk every so often, even if it's just to the bathroom.
So there you have it, guys. Those are the things that we do to try to maintain a healthy lifestyle even when things get super busy at work.
Once again, it's not that we fit in anything crazy or super intense when we're this busy at work, but the small things that we do are practical and actually possible, and do add up in the long run. We try to treat busy periods like this like a marathon, not a sprint, because you'd much rather be running at marathon pace to find out that the race is actually shorter than you expected, rather than running at sprint pace only to find out that the race is actually longer.
Thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you like this video, please hit that like button below and consider subscribing.
And if you have any thoughts on future videos you'd like to see, or if you try any of the things we talked about in this video, please let us know in the comments.